welcome everyone. We're glad to have you here for our Facilities and Safety Committee meeting. I'm going to go ahead and call us to order. It is 4:05 p.m. on January 12th, and this is the Facilities and Safety Committee meeting of the Board of Trustees for Harlingen CISD, and we are in room 502. So, we are going to start. So that was our call to order. The next agenda item is public comments for agenda topics. And do we have anyone for public comments?
Madam Chair, we have 3 for public comments.
Great. I think it may be 2, right? 2. There's 3 lines, so it's confusing. Got it. Okay. So, in light of that, welcome and thank you for being here. I've got some names that I have to read in order to frame the public comments. So let me start with that. Any person wishing to address the board during the period reserved for public comments at a board meeting must sign up and provide information requested below to be heard. In accordance with the district policy BED local, all members of the audience who wish to address the board regarding items to be considered by the board as listed on the agenda for this board meeting may do so by signing up prior to the start of the meeting and listing the agenda item that they would like to discuss. Only those persons on this list who sign up prior to the start of the meeting shall be allowed to speak to the board during the public comment portion of the meeting. For each agenda item, public comment speakers will be allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board. If more than 10 speakers are signed up to speak on the same agenda item, then all additional speakers on that item will be limited to 2 minutes. Members of the public who need to address the board through a translator will be given 6 minutes to make their presentation. Speakers are limited to the items listed on the sign-up sheet. Complaints and concerns for which the resolution channels are provided shall be referred to use those channels. These complaints include complaints on the following subjects: employee and officer complaints, termination of employment, student complaints, comments about students that are not the child of the speaker, removal to alternative education program, and expulsion. Vendors and prospective vendors who are currently or prospectively engaging in the bidding or request for proposal process with the district should comply and review any applicable bid instructions, which may limit comments on current or prospective bids. If the board president determines that there is a conflict with policy, the person shall be directed to the appropriate policy for attempted resolution. Complaints against specific students, employees, or the offices of the district, or comments about a student who is not the child of the speaker may be heard in closed meeting as authorized by the Texas Government Code Title 5, Section 551.074, 551.082, and 551.0821. If your topic concerns complaints against specific employees, students, or offices or about a student who is not the child of the speaker, please note this on the sign-up sheet. You must make your comments on agenda items in a civil and courteous fashion pursuant to Robert's Rules of Order. Avoid using profanity, and we ask that you not discuss students who are not your own child. So we will begin. You're welcome to use this podium if you'd like. We're going to start with Dr. Israel Aguilar, and he'll be speaking on agendas items 7A and 6A. And we will, would you like a 30-second warning before you end? Okay, and so we'll give you that as well.
All right, well, good evening. My name is Israel Aguilar. Thank you all for your time. The first topic that I wanted to talk about on public comment was 7A, the intruder report, which I noticed is going to be discussed in executive session. I think as a community member, I'm not sure I understand why it's discussed in executive session. So that's a concern I think that we all have, that I have. I have school-aged children. As an educator myself, that'd be something that I would want to know, especially since I know that recently, some of the schools and campuses have had very large signs posted in front of them that there is some type of surveillance, that there is armed guards, but those of us on the outside really don't know to what the extent is that looks like. And so when we see something that will be talked about today in closed sessions, you can only imagine what probably comes to mind. For example, I know that in visiting one of the campuses, it was very clear that there was not an armed security guard at any given time. In fact, when we spoke to some of the employees, they made it quite clear that even they are not trained and equipped to the degree that it would take to disarm or apprehend somebody in that moment, that it would happen, that there'd be an active shooter. Again, going back to the signs, I know those, like anything else, must cost a lot of money, and so my concern is that if the money is being spent on some of those tangible things like signs, how much of that can be actually on personnel to stop a would-be shooter. The last thing I wanted to talk about on this opportunity is the design team, which I understand this is what this is. I ask that these types of meetings be held at times and at multiple locations where the working class parent can attend. It's before 5, and most parents, at least like me, have children who, when we get home, we have to do homework. Coming to a meeting like this is a luxury. And I was just talking to Joseph about this, about making the meetings that, not only the committee meetings, but the board meetings accessible. And I think I brought this up the last time in the board meeting, was that signing up for public comment should be online, similar to this particular meeting. I have to come here at least for a certain time before the sheet is picked up. City of Harlingen does it where we can do it online. So I ask that you consider doing these meetings at places and times where a lot more people can attend. Because if I'm the only one here, maybe one other person, that should be a concern to you all as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right, our next speaker is Ms. Lorraine Galarza. Would you also like the 30-second warning?
I would, thank
Okay.
you.
Please begin when you're ready. Yes, ma'am, you had written down 7A and 6.
Just let me know.
Please proceed.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Lorraine Galarza. Thank you all. This is the first time that I've ever attended this meeting before. I have met with Dr. Loyola to discuss a safety committee that I have found had to be formed by the TEA during the summer. I read up on that during our journey in conducting town hall meetings and involving and engaging the community and concerned with the school security and safety. And so we are here today. We had to really search for this meeting and this time that was posted online. We've been following it. And going back to what Dr. Israel Aguilar was saying, we're very few here today. We made it possible to be here. But talking about intruder report, I actually happened to present myself in the month of December before the school board, and I discussed an event where I myself had approached one of the security staff. I'm not even going to say officers, because he's not a certified security guard. But at Vernon here, there was an event where there was a parent day, and I happened to approach him. Not only was he not equipped, but doesn't even have the set skills to have even conducted a conversation with myself. What turned out to be that was telling the public of a sign where it says armed security duty officer happened to turn out to be false. So I brought up that issue and concern before the school board. I questioned the gentleman. I took a picture of him, which I provided the pictures to all the school board members at last month's meeting, and he did not want to identify his name. He was not armed, and his response to me when I asked him where is the armed security officer that is being displayed and being told to the public, he told me that the armed officers were at the police department. And I replied to him, well, I understood that there are armed officers at the police department, but I wanted to know about the one that was at the school. So they did not have any, and again, this was during an event, they had a lot of parents, they had a lot of students. This is not the first time, ladies and gentlemen, that I have discovered that. There have been many instances where I have gone to Rodriguez School, I have gone to Dishman, I have gone to Austin, and I have found the same concern. I have been contacted by parents out in the public from the school districts just because we have been very active and engaged with the community and voicing their concerns. The memorandum of understanding just isn't going to cut it. I do not understand the closed session for the intruder report. I also believe that that is something that should be discussed before the public. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Galaza. Alright, and as all of you may know, public comment is an opportunity for us to listen, but not to comment. So we thank you for being here and thank you for your comment. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item. It's the presentation and update on the ESSER-funded projects. Mr. Tapia.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Facilities Committee meeting, and Dr. Miola. The first item we're going to talk about are the ESSER-funded projects, which are the federal stimulus funds. The first one is the air conditioning contracts that we have with reliable vendors, Train Carrier and Dakin. These were the last remaining ones that we did through the Vibor. At Stewart Place, there was 2 chillers, and one of them's come in and been installed, but the other one just arrived, so they're going to be installed in here in the next week and through the weekend, get that second chiller fired up. At Bonham, the 11 units that I reported last month were being worked on. As of during the holidays, they were all completed. At Zavala, they arrived during the holidays and they were all installed and completed as well, so they're up and running and operational. The annex building across the street, there was 12 units to be delivered on December 17th. Those units did not come in, so we're waiting for a delivery date. As you know, air conditioning equipment is just taking months and months and delays, sometimes up to a year to receive. So we should be a few weeks away from getting those if they didn't make it here during the holidays. So I'll report that at next month's meeting. The high school orchestra building, the 2 rooftops were installed and completed that I reported last month. And that's an example of the rooftop units that were replaced at Zavala Elementary. There was 12 of them. The next project is Sigma Engineering bid out a project and it was awarded to Central Air and Heating at one of the previous board meetings for $2.2 million for air conditioning controls, digital controls at Coakley, and new AC units at Laurel and Wilson Elementaries. And that project was awarded to Central Air and Heat. Everything's been approved through the engineer, the submittals, the drawings, so now they put the equipment to order. We're waiting for a probably May or June delivery date, so we'll keep it posted when those units come in. The other project we have is through DBR Engineering. It's another firm. That one was also awarded to Central Air and Heating for $2.5 million for new air conditioning units at Bowie Elementary and new controls at Gutierrez Middle School. And same thing here, they were awarded at the same time. Well, we're just waiting for the estimated time of arrival for those units. So we'll update you at the next meeting to see if we have a definite month of arrival. The other project we had was with Ethos Engineering. This was at Harlingen High School to replace the condenser water pipes and hydronic piping modifications at the chiller plant. Went for $575,000. Well, that was our budget. We did receive 3 bids December 14th, right before the break. Carrier submitted a bid, Quantum Mechanical and Central Air and Heating. Those are the 3 proposals. We do have an alternate bid for some additional piping from the chiller plant to the cooling water tower. And so we're going to be ranking those tomorrow. And we'll make a presentation at next week's board meeting to award to one of these firms after we rank it to see who has the best value for the district. The other part of the bid that Ethos had was for the annex building across the street for new automatic digital controls. It was awarded to Automatic Logic. They've submitted all their submittal information and they've gotten approval from the engineer, so they put the order for the new controls and chiller piping reinstallation. So we're just waiting for, by the next meeting, we should know when those materials will be arriving, but that's been awarded as well. On the roof and doors and windows projects, Janak Architects is working on some re-roofing projects at the schools listed there. We have a budget of about 2.9 million. And door and window improvements for 871,000. Those plans are finished, they were completed over the break. So we're gonna be doing two different bid packages to award it to roofing companies or to small contractors. So we get a better price than putting it all under a big general contractor. So we'll be advertising these in either February or March, come up with a recommendation for award. The other ESSER funded project with Megamorphosis was for Harlingen High School. This is a big wings 1 through 7, and the administration, the mini gym, and the old choir room and CC Lab building. And we did get proposals yesterday, 3 of them, and the proposals came in from RGO Roofing, CS Advantage, and Davila Construction. And those are the bids that were submitted, roughly between 3.2, 3.8, and 4.6 million. We're gonna rank, we're already in the process of ranking them. We'll finalize something by tomorrow or the next day, but we will submit an agenda item for next week to award it to one of these 3 firms. And we're also looking at 3 alternate bids, which are for, these are all the buildings at the high school that will be re-roofed. And the top one, in the middle, and the one on the right, and the one below it, it's kind of hard to see, but between 7, 3, and 2 are the alternates. Our budget was at about 3.8 million, so we're close to that. So we're gonna work with Rudy to see do we have sufficient stimulus funds to award the 3 alternates to get these other 3 wings in, or do we just go with the base bid? So that's something we're gonna evaluate, and we'll make a recommendation at next week's board meeting. Any question on this project?
I know there's been some discussion about the leaking leaks at HHS. Is this mainly to address?
Yes, these are the sections that the last really big rain we had leaks, and it's all falls under some of one of these buildings, especially the ones on the right, wings 1 through 7, and the long one on the right is wing 8, which faces 13th Street. But the ones in the middle there, those 6 buildings, those are the ones that leak the most. So we really need to address those, and perfect timing with the ESSER funding to address these 3 roofs. Those are all the ESSER funded projects. Now we go to the TRE local funded projects. The first project we want to talk about is STEM Academy, currently on Jefferson Street. And we've talked about this before at 2 previous facility committee meetings, that we had the report that the building up front, that was the old armory, and then it was St. Paul's Academy, and then we bought it. The old building up front has some foundation and roof issues. And when we bought it many years ago, that we had an engineering report to say that building, there's a rule of thumb, if it's gonna cost 60% or more to remodel versus constructing new, it's not worth investing in that kind of construction. So the recommendation is to knock down that building and renovate the rest of it. So we've hired an architect, and Mr. Pierce is here from Megamorphosis, to do a master plan to see what it would cost to renovate that building. Or do we have other alternate sites that maybe we can relocate the program to? So after the past couple of meetings that we've talked about, we are leaning towards possibly relocating this program to the School of Health Professions, which is a new school by Memorial Middle School. Some of the benefits that we're looking at is the cost to relocate STEM to the School of Health Professions, and to repurpose the existing STEM, because then it'll be vacant and then we can do something with that, would be equivalent to remodeling and upgrading the current facility if we wind up staying there, especially with the logistical cost of demolition, working around the kids, bringing in more portables, and just a lot of back and forth and interrupting the program. So we feel that it's better to move to School of Health Professions and do a new wing, so we can keep them there, and then when the new wing's done, move them out, and then we can go back and see what we can do with that building in the long term. So by the time it's all said and done, it's probably kind of a wash, close to maybe a little, maybe 1.5 million more than the original 8 to 9 million that the architect thinks it might take to renovate and fix up the existing school. So the logistical implications I talked about, minimum interruptions to Several, a good substantial part of those eighth graders go to School of Health anyway, so it'd be a good feeder. So mainly the new wings for the sixth and seventh grades, and then be a separate wing so it keeps some separation from the main campus, kind of like a school within a school. Enrollment is at 380 at School of Health, and it's designed for 550, so we have capacity, and then adding the new wing would accommodate the additional students. Curriculum would be strategically aligned with the School of Health. School of Health would then, this would include building out the kitchen, which right now it has a serving kitchen. We would build a full kitchen because now it's a bigger school. It would create an innovative 6th to 12th grade school experience, which we don't have in our district, and would consolidate transportation to one site. So those are some of the benefits that we're looking at, and I want to open up to any questions you may have before we move any forward on this project. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, one thing, just speaking from a parent, right, that's had a child that's attended both of those schools, is I think, you know, doing some communication with parents of children that are going into the sixth grade, right, about what their thoughts are and discussing with them, right, what that relationship's gonna be with high school students and how that's gonna look, I think, just to set them at ease. And then the other is, I totally agree that a lot of those students end up in health professions, but there's also that other STEM component, right? So really making sure there's some that end up going to collegiate and are really focused on the robotics piece and that part. So really making sure that we keep that component and to discuss how we're gonna integrate that piece into, even though we're gonna relocate it and it is more associated with health professions, right? How we're gonna stay true to that, the spirit of that as well.
Sure.
Eventually.
Any other comments?
Couple of questions. So, give us an idea what kind of due diligence, at least with the families involved and the communities involved, what kind of due diligence have we done in terms of asking them sort of the pros and cons of this type of deal? And then the second part of the question is, programmatically, what's going to change in terms of the programs being offered? If that's
So we're still in this process. Right now, this is just the first layer of assessment. We're still having to go through some discussions with the campuses and so forth. But the idea is still about staying true to the STEM components of instruction. One of the pieces that STEM Squared speaks to is that medical component. That's where the squared aspect of things kind of came from. So we're finding that a lot of kids have the interest in both of those, and they're still debating, do I go math and science, do I go medical, and so they're experiencing both. So it's still about staying true to the STEM programming as it associates. But one of the things that we're looking at is just the availability of a lot of the facilities that currently exist at School of Health Professions, the labs and things of that nature that would give kids that double opportunity. So it's still about staying true to the program, but maximizing the opportunities that are found at School of Health Professions.
I just want to make sure that we're, the benefits to the students and the community and the programs, and make sure that that's the reason, not just sort of solving the facility problem, maximizing the space issue,
Right.
that's the secondary issue, the benefit of it. But we need to make sure that our focus is on at least, serving these students and their families in the best possible way in those high quality programs that from an educational benefit standpoint.
Dr. Niola, would you also say how you feel like this potential move fits with upcoming strategic plan goals and ideas?
Sure. And so as we talk about what we're looking at in terms of partnership opportunities, a lot of focus on experiential opportunities for kids where they're really experiencing these programs that they want to be a part of, right? And so that's one of the beauties of what currently exists at School of Health Professions is that it's a lot of that experiential, a lot of partnerships, a lot of people coming in to speak to kids about careers and those fields. And so as we've studied it, and there's still some things to continue to study, but the opportunities that will exist for students to move more into those types of experiences in their learning is really what's coming through strategic plan. And I think, one of the highlights of a potential move like this.
And then that got me thinking, are you gonna have to sort of unwind that sort of partnership with ETRGU and the Memorial? Because didn't we sort of,
No, actually, so we originally had discussions about Memorial, but Memorial really has really moved into that blended learning type of world. And so as we looked at that, and they've done tremendous work within that area, the blended learning really is where Memorial has really found their niche. And so that allowed for us to really think about how do we create additional pipelines. And so since STEM Square was already building that pipeline, except that they're across town from each other. And so this potentially could bring them a little bit closer to creating a more defined pipeline into school health professions.
so then, is there opportunities to sort of re-engage ETRGU and say, hey, listen,
Absolutely.
we're
And
putting
if
this
you-
all in one campus?
Correct, so if you remember when we signed the agreement with UTRGE about the type of experiences that we would be having at School of Health Professions, it was about the things we were doing in the summer, and we had talked about how do we bring in this middle school component. And so this will allow us to backtrack as far back as 6th grade to really create some meaningful pipelines with UTRGE. And that's the conversation we were having around how do we bring in this middle school component. And so the possibility of a 6 to 12 is really exciting for what potentially kids, the types of experiences that they can have early, so that by the time they hit high school and junior year and so forth, they really solidify where their interests are. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to help kids engage a lot sooner and get the university involved as well.
Yeah, so what is, I mean, I know we have a ton of space there, land there, I mean, expanding that campus is kind of difficult, I guess. But I say that because it is a school choice, and it's one of those where now if you bring in the element of starting at 6th grade, you might get a lot more interest
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
outside HCIC community. So I just want you to be thinking about that, because that could be a very real situation. Because now a lot more people are saying, wait a minute, now we can start in middle school over here, and it could be an HCIC, this could be in Leondo, Feria, I don't know where, I mean, you know, all kinds of possibilities, Westlake or whatever, and they might have some interest to do that.
Well, and that piece around not having to do multiple transitions, right? So transition from elementary to 6th grade, from 8th grade to high school and so forth, and a 6 to 12 component where I start there and I go through, and that's something that we've always had parents express an interest on around how do we minimize the transitions for
We'll
kids.
go back, this is not for here nor there, the transition, I think there's more data to get rid of, is the transition from elementary to middle. You're not getting rid of that, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another discussion, but anyway, so.
I have one last, and this is just like when you're thinking about this and then I'm looking at this, just speaking from someone who does that pickup there, or anyone who's
Well, I mean, I work in
Memorial.
already, and so
Yes.
traffic, getting to work, if you go to Memorial at 7:30, you cannot, and I'm telling you, cannot get through that street. And right now, you know, with entering and exiting through one door, we haven't been able to park in the back. My question is, when are you gonna open up 21st Street?
That,
You
yes.
need to open up that street, because my child goes to school there and I work there. So traffic, it gets crazy. And then you have the transition school, which I know that they come at 11 and 2, but there's gonna be so much traffic on 21st Street, it's gonna be crazy. And especially if you have a campus at 6 to 12. Like right now, we're lucky that the health profession starts a little bit later than us, but when you open up that school, they're gonna have to start when we start. And so you really have to think about the traffic situation that is gonna be bottled up on 21st, because I barely see anyone come down Phoenix. Everyone comes down 21st. So I know we have that dead end, and I know it's part of the city also, but it would be so much more helpful to everyone around those campuses if that street was opened up.
Sometimes I forget to come, I just forget sometimes to come by Phoenix, and so if you turn on 21st, and you're waiting to turn to where health professions and that campus potentially could be, then it's a lot of traffic going to Memorial. So, just kind of something to think about, right, if it's something.
And that's pickup also, you have to
Yeah,
pickup.
it's a
Because
pickup,
if you
that's normally
if you
when
go
I
through
encounter
there
that.
right now or after school, it's insane also.
It sounds like.
And we have 4 lines at Memorial.
It sounds like from your testimony, it sounds like we don't have to wait to make this change, start having those discussions with the city to open up 24. It's like, are we doing that, or?
That was part of what we talked about. We're still in the process of working on what potentially the whole layout can look like. And yeah, exactly to what Liz's conversation was, it's a city conversation.
Okay. All right, Mr. Tapia, proceed. Thank you all.
Okay, the next project are the renovations we're doing at Arlington High School. Talked about this a couple of times already. We finally bid it out, and we got 2 proposals. And we have Trigen Construction and Ziwa Construction at 2.3 and 2.39 respectively, with a couple of alternates there. We just are in the process of ranking that. We should finalize this tomorrow also and get it on the next week's agenda. For the improvements to the buildings, some courtyard work, lighting, the courtyard, sidewalks, and all the improvements that we have there. Any questions on this project? Zavala Elementary, we started this project during the break. We're doing the remodel of the kitchen. You can see there the old kitchen on the right with the old floors. It has VCT flooring. So we're gutting it out, and we knocked down the little freezer cooler there on the top left. You can see the interior work. And now you can see that the freezer cooler is demolished. We're cutting slabs to install new plumbing. We had a lot of broken pipes with the old cast iron, and been repairing them over the years, so we're gonna put new lines. And this project was awarded to Gerlach Builders for $715,000. It was awarded at a board meeting, so this project's finally underway. Any questions on this project? The other project we're working on is the Early Childhood Academy. This project's being worked on by Holtzman Construction, and we're about 100% complete with all the interior work that we've presented before. We're waiting for the exterior work, which are those 4 little additions on the top and the bottom for additional restrooms for the pre-K students. Top part is one of the parent cafe next to the library. We expanded that area for kids and for parents, meeting places, study areas. And the bottom are the new restrooms. You can see that we still need to do some ceiling tile work, the floor, and install the fixtures and some cabinetry work they're working on. We think about another 3 to 4 weeks, it should be completed. Just some of the interior work that we did. They did the terrazzo floors to bring them back up to the original shine. And that's the exterior work. They still need to do some block work, some roof string relocations they're doing, and the roof as well. Any questions on that project? As part of this project, we're doing the exterior work for the playscapes on the outside. Scott Pajeski, the landscape architect that's working on this, to have some additional areas outside for the kids. And just an idea, I know it's real hard to see, but there's some pathways, there's some play areas, there's mud pits, sand pits, trees, landscaping, little cycling areas, things like that for the kids for their educational program. The design's final, so we're going to be advertising it this coming weekend. And we'll bring it forth probably in the February or March board meeting once we get the bids and rankings. The First Responders Building is the Firefighters Paramedic Academy. This project is 80% complete, and that's the remodeling of the old building that we did. It's behind the Secondary Alternative Center. And that's the interior work that we fixed those classrooms up for the Firefighters Academy, the offices, storage, and this is the big area for the firefighters equipment and paramedic program and so forth. So we're about a month from completing this project as well. And some of the interior, new electrical work, new hallways, restroom upgrades. The next project is the Bogus Stadium project. The redoing of the surfacing of the track that we did. They already finished the surface, new track material. Comes in a 2-tone color. It's a red color with a gray on the turning exchange lanes. The only thing they need to do now is the striping work, the striping and the marking, and just an area of the long jump, triple jump area, and the track. So it's again a couple of weeks out, depending on the weather. Fire alarm bid, we did fire alarms at Austin, Lamar, Sac. We've completed Austin, Sac. We're now going to be working at Lamar. And the intercom at Milam is complete. It was completed during the holidays. and a couple of contingency allowance expenditures to report. Early childhood, number 7, we did some additional corner guards at columns because they get banged up and nicked and they chip off, so we've got some new color guards around them. We got a credit for the soap dispensers that they don't comply with what we use for our custodial program that fits our materials for soaping and dispenser for the paper and things like that. So we're gonna put our own. We got a credit for the ones that were in the project. And we've got credit back for the carpet at the multipurpose building. So that whole thing, after we added the guards and got credit, we got it was only about $759. So of the $82,000, we actually gained money back. So our allowance is now up to $83,112. The next allowance that we have is guardrails on the learning stairs in the library, was required by code. And there's a roof drain that when we made the addition had to be extended out. They didn't know it was there, so they found it during construction. So it was additional cost to do that. We changed some doors from the special ed rooms to the offices because the special ed doors didn't have the little windows. They had them in the office, so we did swap, new hardware, new closures and so forth. And so that whole change order was for $8,000, so we still have $75,098 left in that contingency for that project. On the parking lot improvements that we did at Wilson and Administration Annex on the concrete repair and the Stewart Place and Austin playground overlays, we did have some additional asphalt we had to remove at Wilson for the grading and for the 3,400, and Annex and Stewart Place had some additional milling. They had to tear out a little bit more asphalt and mill it and repave it to make it all look new at the seams. So overall, those are 2 expenditures. We still, from the $25,000, we still have $16,459 left in that project on the contingency fund. And that is the end of my presentation. Are there any questions?
Just a quick reminder, I think I mentioned this in the previous board meeting, I know I have, I don't know when, and I don't know if it's appropriate, what time it's gonna be appropriate, but I think it's always time, from time to time, periodically, to review the ranking criteria. You've got a lot of bids that you're bringing back and forth to the board, and you're gonna, next meeting, for example, and you're discussing both these funded projects and all these funded projects. I just think things evolve over time, our needs evolve, our experience with companies evolve, what's important, what's not important evolves, all these kinds of things, and so sometimes you wanna give more points here, this, that, and things aren't working. Maybe you guys have recommendations, I'm hopeful you have recommendations to say, yeah, I think we should, put more points here and there, because this is your expertise, but I think the board should always look at that from time to time. In
Yeah,
terms
Wilson
of
and I looked at that, and we actually updated it 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah, we made some changes, and
Right.
so it's still kind of current, but in the next year or 2, we can look at any additional changes.
I don't know,
I think we can bring it back for review.
Yeah.
And just kind of, go over it with the board as far as, the criteria and the points that we have allocated.
right.
And if, we can make any changes that, that the board might, entertain, we can certainly bring that forward.
I would love to see that, if it's not too early this next meeting, or if not the following
Yeah,
meeting. I mean,
sure.
there's no emergency, but I just think it's something I think that's just prudent governance and oversight to just, from time to time, look at that and make sure, maybe they'll have no changes, that's great, but at least, the board's part of that, and knowing what's important, what's not important, and things like that, so. Making sure we're getting the most value, for every facility, for every tax dollars, for every tax dollar.
And maybe we can set it up for next month or in March for sure.
Yeah. Next item?
Yes, so we'll move to, construction funds and other projects, financial report, Mr. Cavazos.
Thank you, Dr. Neal, Dr. Reiner, good afternoon. Agenda item number 5 is construction funds report, and I apologize for this one, that great, but I do have a handout. Column number 2 is year 1 through 6 of the budget, about $74.3 million. Column number 3 is, year 7 of the budget, another $10 million. And column number 4 is year 8 of the cherry budget, another $10 million. So in total, about $94.3 million that has been appropriated. In column number 5, we have spent $79.1 million in year 1 through 7. Column number 6 is what we spent this year, and what we have committed, another $8 million. So we have spent and committed about $87.1 million for the first 7.5 years. We have about $7.2 million left in this TRE budget year, and we anticipate that we're probably going to be spending most of that before the end of June. You got a chance to answer any questions? committee members right now.
Very good, thank you, sir. All right, next, agenda is school safety design team plan. Dr. Villarreal.
Sure. Good afternoon, Dr. Reiniger, committee and audience. We're going to bring up a presentation right now. So if you recall, back in July, we started on our journey to develop a school safety plan that would bring forward recommendations to enhance safety and security in our school district. So to do so, we assembled a design team consisting of a wide array of district stakeholders. We had administrators, teachers, counselors, parents, community members, and law enforcement experts. And so, from that team, if you recall, we created subcommittees, and each of those, for each of those components that you see here, you see infrastructure, mental health, crisis management, and then communication, both internal and external. Well, we already presented on infrastructure, mental health, and crisis management in previous committee meetings, and so at this time, we're going to go ahead and present on recommendations that were brought forward by the subcommittee, so that we can look at what the future looks like in communication, both internal and external, in our school district. One of the first recommendations that came forward from our subcommittee had to do with the availability of radios. And not that they're not available, but making them more readily available for all of our teachers that are in playgrounds, coaches that are outside in the fields, so that they're able to communicate. And so there are radios currently, but it's a matter of upgrading those and just increasing the number of radios that we have out there, out in those faraway areas of our campuses. Also looking at the expedience of safety work orders, we want to make sure that anytime any work order is submitted and it's related to school safety and security, that it's priority number one. And so that's already been something that we've completed here in our school district. It was as simple as adding a checkbox when that work order is submitted, and so it automatically becomes priority one so that the issue can be addressed immediately. The next one is to identify creative ways to keep our community informed. And so it's a matter of getting creative, getting innovative on communicating with our community and our stakeholders. We know that our community uses social media. We know that we make phone calls home and text messages. But what happens when those means are not available? And it's an emergency situation, the internet's down. What is that going to look like? How are we going to communicate to everybody in our community about what we're doing or how we're responding to an emergency event? And so we just want to make sure that we're constantly coming up with new ways to communicate with our community. We also are increasing and updating our Wi-Fi zones at our campuses. And so that's extremely important, so we can ensure that cell phones are working properly at our campuses, so that if an administrator, a teacher, a staff member needs to call the lockdown or respond to an emergency event, we're able to do so via our Wi-Fi. And so we started doing that last year and started upgrading our systems at Dr. Cano, at the PAC, as well as our comprehensive high schools. And with this upcoming E-rate cycle, we're going to concentrate on our 5 middle schools. And so we just want to make sure that we're upgrading the Wi-Fi technology that we have on our campuses. The next one is about educating first responders on the standard response protocol. And that's been ongoing since day one. And so I have Mr. Danny Castillo here next to me. On a monthly basis, he meets with the lead officers from our law enforcement agencies across the community to make sure that they're well versed when it comes to our standard response protocol, so that they understand when we call a lockdown, when we call it secure, we call a hold, what does that mean on campus and what does that look like? In addition to that, how do we communicate that to our families so they can make sure they're communicating the same procedures to them as well. The next thing is partnering with all responding law enforcement entities, and that's somewhat tied to that one that I just mentioned, and so making sure that we're building those relationships, and those are going to be ongoing. Again, it has to do with those monthly meetings that we have with our law enforcement entities. But if you see there that last part, including a clear understanding of protocols and responsibilities. We always have that question that comes up: who is in charge when someone has to respond to an emergency event at a campus? And we want to make sure that everybody is aware and educated on what that looks like, especially with our law enforcement entities. And the person that's always going to be in charge is that first responding entity there, right? Then it's going to be who's the highest ranking official within that entity. That person's going to take charge. But there may be another entity that arrives that has more resources available to that entity, then that highest ranking official from that entity will take charge of that event. And so that's why it's extremely important that we have all of these entities coming together, whether it be HPD, Primera, whether it be DPS, you know, and the list goes on, we're making sure that they're coming together, communicating, getting to know each other, so that in the event something we have to respond, we're gonna do so responsibly, and that we have a system in place to make sure that we're responding appropriately. And so that one is extremely important, and that's ongoing, and I do wanna, you know, commend Mr. Danny Castillo and Ms. Tanya Sandoval, because they're constantly in communication with our law enforcement partners there. The other recommendation was researching remote intercom capabilities, which would allow us to make announcements to be called from any part of the school. So this will allow us to go into, if there's a telephone in a particular office on the second floor, punch in a code, we can call a standard response protocol from there, whether it be a hold, a secure. Also, the capability will exist on our cell phones as well. Yes, sir?
And the change, that change is because right now it's only at one place, like in the central office, or what?
To do for, if you want to do the intercom, yes,
Okay.
wherever the intercom capability is. But we're gonna be bringing actually next week, and so we'll be able to upgrade that as soon as possible to the
I
board
like
your
that change,
recommendation.
but students are smart, and, you know, you don't want to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
All the doors are locked.
I was one of those guys back in the day, I would have figured it out real quick.
What's the code?
Thank you for the warning.
And then our silent panic alert technology, and so we were recently awarded actually a $50,000 grant from the Texas Education Agency to make sure that we're updating our technology when it comes to our silent panic alerts. Normally, in most instances, there's a button, a hot button that might be underneath a you know, a desk somewhere, and you call that. Well, this again, it's gonna allow us to call and push a button from anywhere. And you know, and it's not necessarily nowadays a physical button. It's, you know, whether it be through a cell phone, whether it be through a telephone, and then to take it to the next level, when somebody has to call this event, you tense up, right? And so we want to make it a little bit easier for that person that may be calling that event, because it could be anybody. It could be the secretary, it could be a custodian. And so we're working on an automated message that would be, you know, heard over the intercom. So that way, it's not a human being that's having to do it right there in at that moment. That there would be a pre-recorded message that would alert our campus as to what's going on. And then our last recommendation, which is a big one, but one that we want to make sure that we're doing carefully, doing right, is establishing our HCIC communication system, which would provide for both internal and external radio communications, for day-to-day operations and emergency communications with all responder entities. To put it simply, it's about establishing our own radio channel, so that when we have our law enforcement partners on the campus, or we have our principals and administrators on the campus, we're able to communicate all at once and appropriately through a dedicated radio channel, so that we can make sure that if an event is called, we're gonna be able to communicate through that channel. And so, you know, that's a big undertaking, but that's something that we're gonna start researching and exploring, so that we can make sure that we have that in place in our school districts. Are there any discussions or questions that we can entertain at this time? Okay. Oh, yes.
Sorry, there we go.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, Ms.
So first, I just want to thank, I know we've got some of the members of the committee here, so I just want to thank them for their work. And then secondly, I know we're talking about communication, and I get it, right, like how we're going to address that. I guess my question was on the communication of how we're going to let all of the folks know what we're doing and the hard work that all of our subcommittees have done towards this project, right?
So even broader communication.
Yes, right, because I know I've even been asked questions externally, like, what are we doing? You know, I know y'all have these committees, but what is going on? And they're not getting that message or the story about all the great work and all the recommendations that you all are providing. And so I think, just like we're moving forward strategic plan-wise, I think for this piece too, getting that communication piece out, you know, instead of us just kind of answering piecemeal, because y'all know the best, right, about what those recommendations look like and, you know, what the final project looks like and what y'all are moving forward with, so.
Thank you.
That's my only thing.
So important. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other comments or questions?
And Dr. Renner, there's one more item there.
Please.
Since our last Facilities and Safety Committee meeting, one of our campuses, Dr. Cano Freshman Academy, has undergone an intruder detection audit by the Texas School Safety Center. Dr. Cano Freshman Academy did have one minor finding and has since been corrected. As per the Texas Education Agency and the Texas School Safety Center, The one finding will be discussed and reported during our executive session. And so Dr. Reiniger, I'll turn it back to you.
So we will now move into executive session. Thank you for that. So, members of the Facility and Safety Committee, please stay. The rest of you are free to go as we have a discussion, and then we'll just come back. All right, so we will move for adjournment of the Facilities and Safety Committee meeting. Thank you, committee members. Thank you so much for all your work and for taking time to be here. We really appreciate partnerships and the input from people who know. So, and thank you, Mr. Tapia. I just want to mention amazing amount of work.
Okay,
Certainly happens over the holidays.
Yeah.
Over the holidays. Thank you to your team.
It's
All right.
the kids are not there, that they can do a lot of work.
Yeah,
Once the kids come back, they gotta tiptoe around, and it's hard.
It's great work. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thanks.